Why are Indians scamming everyone? Why is it that not every Indian is a scammer, but every scammer is an Indian? Have you ever thought this way? Or even read those countless do not redeem racist comments that Indians get online every day? Nowadays, there's a trend where Indians have been given the title scammers by the internet. And you know the real reason behind it? It's not racism. Indians are actually scamming the world. Look at the data. In the year 2022, American citizens lost $10 billion connected to scam call centers that were being operated from India. In 2023, the FBI conducted an investigation and found that most of these scam calls originated from India. And India is the scam capital of the world, so naturally they believe in equality. They also scam their own people just as much. After the United States, the two countries with the most amount of scam complaints were Canada and India. But why is the situation so bad here? Now, you would agree that Pakistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka have worse poverty rates than India. Then why is it that scamming is a culture only in India? We'll get to that shortly, but look at this. In 2024, India officially recorded 3.6 million cases of cyber fraud, out of which only 10,000 arrests were made, a ratio of 0.27%. And mind you, these were only the recorded numbers. Most people after getting scammed do not report it due to fear of embarrassment. So think of how bad the on-ground reality is. All of this makes us want to ask, why don't the cops do anything and how can we fix this? Let's dive into it. Now wait a minute, here's a heads up. Some of you might be offended by this video regardless of where you live. You would either call me a scammer apologist or you would accuse me of defaming my own country. But I hate to break it to you, everything I say is on the basis of data and evidence. So if the truth hurts your feelings, I suggest you swipe away. In the US, an innocent 85-year-old woman was scammed out of $12,300. As soon as something like this happens, we see angry tweets and comments all over the internet. Indians have nothing better to do. They're all scammers. While it's very easy to sit in an air-conditioned room and say this, the reality is not that simple. This scam industry traces its roots to India's biggest achievements, or rather, curses. You might have heard that line, India is the world's largest IT hub, but there's more to this line that is conveniently omitted. India is the world's largest IT hub, not for innovation, but for exporting cheap labor. India produces 1.5 million engineers every year, but last year, 90% of them were expected to be unemployed due to a massive skill gap. While we have a ton of engineers, most of them aren't equipped to build great apps or tech companies thanks to the education system and terribly low R&D spend. Countries like China, Israel and the US spend 2 to 5 times more than India as a percentage of their GDP when it comes to research and development. So in order to cut costs, companies from these innovative nations outsource their boring, non-innovative, tedious operations like customer support and maintenance to an Indian company that runs a small office or a call center. If you speak English and know how to do basic stuff on a computer, you are fit to work at one of these companies like most Indian engineers. The only problem is none of these companies pay well, and if you resign, there's 10 more people like you willing to work for a meager 15,000 rupees or $200 a month. But wait a minute, there is another job with the same requirements, basic computer skills and English, and you would be paid 3 times more. This time, however, you wouldn't be doing tech support, you would be doing tech support. Similar to this IT model, they're propped up different call centers, not for offering services, but for scamming gullible people. Look at the story of Pawan Pujari, for example, a 19-year-old. He was earning more than 45,000 rupees a month in the form of salaries and bonuses by working at one such center. Now you might wonder, why don't people like Pawan have a spine? Don't they have morals? Because India has a huge population that can speak English, and because more than 90% of them earn less than 25,000 rupees a month, most people like Pawan do this because there simply isn't another option. You cannot support your family with a meager salary of 15 to 20,000 rupees. With that kind of income inequality, it's easier to find someone willing to scam another person as opposed to understanding the theory of relativity. None of India's neighbors, Sri Lanka, Pakistan or Bangladesh, have a similar environment despite having more poverty, which is why India took the crown. A mentor of mine told me something very powerful. When a country is plagued by poverty, People don't have values, they afford them. But wait, that's just the reason behind it. None of this is justified, and India has millions of police officers, so why have they failed when it comes to stopping this? Now, before I tell you that, if you learned something new up until this point, please consider subscribing to the channel, as that's what keeps us insanely motivated. For starters, in India, money is king. Whoever has it calls the shots. In this case, the mastermind of the scammer call center. The low pay problem that we just spoke about, which draws so many people into this profession, affects law enforcement agencies as well. Police constables, for instance, make a meager 30 to 35,000 rupees a month, which is not enough to sustain a family in most major cities. To add fuel to the fire, this is lower than what Pawan was making scamming people. This is what leads to them resorting to bribes to make ends meet. Several times, scam call centers might offer them 10 to 20 times their annual salaries to turn a blind eye towards their operation. People love to talk about how Singapore ranks so high when it comes to fighting corruption, but fail to realize that it is also one of the richest nations in the world where the need for corruption is next to zero. Now, most police officers aren't corrupt, but despite that, it's near impossible to track down these scam call centers and prosecute the mastermind. Because these centers rake in millions of dollars every single month, the mastermind is able to hire the best lawyers and always find a scapegoat to take the blame. As if all this wasn't enough, there's also a resource allocation crisis in two areas. First is the law and order situation in general, and second is cybercrime. On the outset, India has 40% fewer cops than what the United Nations says is bare minimum. At scale, with 1.5 billion people, this can be disastrous. Moreover, things like violent crime, theft, VIP protection for government officials and politicians take up a huge chunk of the cops' budgets, and cyber fraud takes a backseat. I'll give you a crazy example. The entire state of Madhya Pradesh had a total of 115,000 police officers, out of which only 230 were trained to take on cybercrime cases. And together, these 230 were dealing with 300,000 pending cases, with nearly 38,000 being added in 2024 alone. And this is not unique to just one state or even India. It's a global phenomenon. Look at the case of the UK. Cyber fraud there accounts for 40% of all the crime that occurs in the England and Wales region, but only receives 1% of police resources. Moreover, in many cases, the cops have nothing to prosecute. The crime is in front of them, but they can't do anything about it. A scam that occurs in Washington or Toronto, perpetrated by an Indian, is very hard to pursue because a case needs to be registered here. The complainant needs to be physically present in India. Dealing with this jurisdictional complexity costs a lot of time and money, leading to the victims giving up on the thought of justice. There is a whole research paper on this subject centered around India, published by the FBI and the IC3, talking about why countries need to cooperate with each other and put an end to this problem. All of this sounds unfixable, but it isn't. We could do a bunch of things. First, we need tighter regulation when it comes to KYC. The Kerala police arrested a man with 40,000 SIM cards. There needs to be a centralized database that links every single person to his phone number, and there cannot be a single person with more than 2 phone numbers. Next, spoofing is super easy to conduct in India. Even in 2025, we keep receiving calls from international numbers. When India's telecom operator TRAI took measures to curb this problem, it actually worked. Overhauling these systems and spending more money here could be an absolute game changer. We also need significantly better levels of cooperation between the law enforcement agencies of our country and the ones where these crimes occur. Several of them go unpunished purely because of jurisdictional challenges. The Indian authorities, along with a foreign entity like the FBI, have worked together in the past and found success, but these cases are not even 1% of the total damage done. Simply allowing a foreign resident to file a complaint while remaining overseas, or making it easier for a foreign law enforcement agency to obtain permissions when it comes to investigating a crime in India, could significantly reduce the load when it comes to our law enforcement agency. This would be insanely difficult to execute and would require treaty level change, but we need to recognize that our cops can't do everything alone. The next solution could be a little controversial, but hear me out. In India, corporations are required to do something called corporate social responsibility to show the world that they care about their surroundings. Usually, they've done a bunch of useless things like donating dustbins for a locality or building a couple of public benches. Why aren't we pushing them to use this money to fight cybercrime when we see that our system is overburdened? IT companies, for instance, could pool their resources to upskill police officers in a particular locality. A bank, for instance, could upgrade its transaction monitoring systems so that when these scammers try to bring their scam money into the system, they could be caught sooner. Another company could initiate an awareness drive which would make sure that we have fewer victims, because people now know how these scams work. Point is, CSR can be more than dustbins and benches. It could occur in areas where we actually need change. And if we start taking steps in these directions, maybe one day we'll scam proof the world and not scam it. How do you think this can be solved? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. And if you learned something new, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.